mean, of course, my dad, lucky to have him present in my life. So, he showed me being stern with your words, being focused, being the one who, I mean, yes, both provide, but he really focused on, bringing us upright, making sure we had the things, not only for himself, for us, mother. And I feel like there were just many different male figures in my life who were just doing amazing things that I just couldn't help looking up to. I mean, my principal, I was going to Fatima, that's Father Gregory, who's still the principal there now. He just blew my mind in different ways. He was the type of person who knew every single person's name in the school. Like that just blew my mind, right? And he had a presence where when you're speaking, and that's something I learned early, when you speak to him, he's fully present. It's just something a lot of people miss now, and it's something that I really try to focus on. So just as I went through life, I just meet these different individuals who I feel like they show me something about myself that I need to improve on in different ways. And it's only grown better because, information is everywhere, and I am a glutton for books. So when I read these books and I read autobiographies and I read these self-help books from these individuals and learn about their lives and what they did and how they did it, it's like I can just take pieces of what they say and what they do. And as a coach, I'm looking at the Tony Robbins, I'm looking at the Jim Rohns, I'm looking at even local officials, and I'm saying, okay, what can I take from them that can really add to me as an individual? So for especially for persons who are struggling to find someone who they can look up to, there's so many out there. It's just and it's a really amazing place where if you see someone and you're like, hey, I want to be like them, you can get so much information about them just from going online. So that in and of itself is huge. Here it's a little bit, might be more extreme, I would say, very focused on, as a boy growing up here, it's like you have to be tough, you have to be strong, whatever the extremes may be that come from that. You just kind of follow what you see others doing. I felt like when I went away though, you saw kind of both ends. You see there's more trying to understand either side. I went to a liberal arts school as well, so you're talking about you're doing gender studies, you're learning about some of the experiences that women go through, women understanding some of the experiences that we go through. I do find that they do have things that are a bit extreme, but it did show me that the landscape here, sometimes you can see that there's not a lot of room for growth, although I am seeing it now, thankfully. It really depends. There are different age groups of millennials. And it also, depends on your background. So let's say you're talking about my group of friends. We don't see it as often, but of course, there are some things that you just do and you don't even realize it might be toxic, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just an extreme form of a good trait. So, for example, you could be very, you want to protect your family, but the extreme version, which would make it toxic, is where you are the only one that can protect your family. And even within that experience, there are different actions, small or big, that go along with it. I find that I'm very open to meeting a lot of people, so I've seen the different types of people that experience this type of thing. And for me, I was pretty sheltered, you see that, it can be really bad, right? I have a lot of friends who had it rough growing up, and I see the experiences and the environment they live in, and it's pretty toxic, right? The expectations of what men should be like, hard, unfeeling, emotionless. I see it more in certain places than others. I would say though that it's more, my generation, you see that it's more prevalent of having conversations surrounding it where we are more aware of what it is, right? We are open to changing because we see that, if you act this way, it is bad. So for me, I think that shows progress. It's just now to kind of push it over the edge to then see, okay, what's the next phase? We are more aware. Some are working on it. What happens next? Because at the end of the day, we will pass on whatever traits that we think are normal to our kids, and then the cycle will either continue or end. It's almost like contextualizing each situation and having some level of communication to kind of pinpoint where you're at. So for example, you could have this situation with spouse, and the conversation is okay. He sees particular things as I am the man, I need to do these certain things, provide, etc., etc. And she comes in and she's, well, I think that's okay, but I think I should also be able to do X, Y, and Z. I don't want to do these things and make you feel emasculated, right? Because his natural, reaction to it might be, well, she did this when I said I'm the one who's going to supply this. But his natural reaction will be like, well, I feel like less of a man. But if there's communication within those two, then you could say, okay, well, maybe in this situation that I am not really seeing it the way I should see it. But that can't happen if there's no communication. If it's just, well, this is the way it is, and that's blanket statement, whether at work, whether with raising kids, whether in a relationship, whether on the streets, then you'll find that there will always be some kind of friction because your beliefs are not my beliefs, are not someone else's beliefs. And it would be nice to say that there's a set standard, but at the end of the day, once you're not, it's tough. I can't set a specific standard because at the end of the day, you just don't want to say offend someone, but at the end, you just need to be open to understanding where they're coming from and seeing if there can be some compromise in between. Because it's never going to be, I don't think it's ever really going to be perfect, because everyone's perfect. The idea of perfect is a bit different. To me, it just seems like it's being more or less shattered within like the world we live in now. You talk about in the past where, okay, so a man is the one who is providing. He was the only one that was working. The woman was seen as a cook, they nurture the children, right? But you're seeing that literally anything can kind of happen these days. You can have a woman who is super successful and her husband says, well, I want to stay home and take care of the kids. Does that now mean that because he's taking on, let's say, the traits that are supposed to be what she's was doing, is he seen as lesser, right? It's almost saying that, well, what do we set as the standard now? Or does there really need to be one? I think at the end of the day, it's what you're most comfortable with. Because to say you get into a situation where, I guess this is the standard, and you say, well, I don't fit that standard, and I don't see anything wrong with that. Or I do fit the standard, and I'm like, well, that's cool, let's stay with this. And all persons involved are cool with it. I feel like it shouldn't be an issue once there's no one being harmed within the process, right? For me, it's all about what we see, right? If we're only seeing men portrayed as violent and chauvinistic and all the extremes, then that's what will be accepted as men. But there are so many men just doing amazing things. And I think it comes down to almost societal level, where we have to show, well, this is what men should be. These are the things that we should be doing, and celebrate the men that are doing great things, right? Hold some things so that when the conversation starts around men, you will be seeing mainly positive as opposed to negative, which is tough because this is what people are drawn to, the negativity. We want to see who did this horrible thing, why they did it, and we just tweet about it, share about it, because the negative is what really kind of gets the dopamine rushing in our mind. The good stuff is good, but it's not what we really focus on so much. So you can have a movement where people are doing great things, but we will only focus on the extremes because the extremes are exciting. So how do we now shift it to say, well, let's celebrate the good, because there might be more overwhelmingly good things that men are doing as opposed to the negative. And not only that, I think, and this one is really key, just not saying that when a man does something bad, whatever the particular segment is, to not treat it as though all men are doing that, because that makes us feel like we're attacked. If I want to be an ally and I want to help and I want to understand, it's very hard to do that if I'm being treated as though I've done whatever the horrible thing is in the topic that's being discussed, when I'm just here to learn, here to understand and see how I can do better. Or when I see it happening or seeing the microaggressions that make it happen, how can I help now treat with that? Because at the end of the day, we have to be each other's keeper. And like you say that, and I just think about, like, I just remember I used to go to these plays, these theater plays that my friends used to put on. I can't remember the name of the group, But I stopped going because I just found that every time I went to the play, it was a story about a man abusing someone, and I just thought, this is, I get it, but then what is the message that we're sending? Like, if this is all we're seeing, then it's all that we're gonna expect. Like I had, and as a coach, I'm very particular about like what I allow into my mind, right? I think whatever you think is the norm, whatever you come to expect, is what will more or less happen. I had an ex-girlfriend, and her expectations of life were that, well, I grew up poor, so I'll always be poor. She didn't say it, but it showed in her actions and the way she said things. And she didn't understand that because she kept saying it and because she believed it, it's almost like she was, yeah, right. And I think that's what we do that now. And again, always wanted to focus on the negative. We trump it up, and now it's almost as though this is all that there is, when there's so much other things that are great that we don't highlight as much. I mean, I want to say no, but it's hard to beat. I stopped watching news because all you see is the deaths and the horrible things, and I don't even want to say it's the news media's problem. They're trying to sell papers. They're trying to get attention, and if the attention that's being brought, the most is off of negative things, you can't expect that they're going to say, well, we don't want to make the money, let's focus on something else. And it's not just that, it's social media too. All the things that we click and view and that invokes an emotion, it tends to be negative, it tends to be scandalous, right? Of course, we congratulate the good stuff, but those don't trend as much as, let's say, the horrible things that will be happening. And I mean, to a primal level, as a coach, I know that like 90% of our thoughts tend to be negative, right? It's instinctual. We are made in a way where we want to focus on the negative because the negative is danger. You want to be aware of danger. But in the current day, when we have more control of our surroundings, we don't really need to focus on it as much, but it's still in our mind where focus on the negative. So it's almost like an active push that needs to be made to say, okay, yes, there's bad out there, but there's so much more good. Let's focus more on the good, because when you focus on the bad, it affects the way we talk, the way we interact with each other, the way we think about ourselves and the world. And if we're thinking of it in such a negative way, you can imagine what it's doing to our behavior. I feel like even before you get to the resources, it's the willingness to be vulnerable enough to ask for help, especially if we're talking about more on the abuse side. I mean, that's tough because you already know you might be laughed out of whatever room you're in. Even in general, as a provider, it's super uncomfortable to feel vulnerable. It's super uncomfortable to say, well, I'm failing. Maybe I'm failing in my business. I'm failing at my job, and that will affect me. Because I feel like as I grow older, I see how it's this unspoken thing that men are just meant to be providers anyway, especially with money. We're just meant to have money. It's tricky, it's precarious because it means communicating. And because these issues are so close to home, so emotional, and they've just been around for so long, it's very difficult to not get emotional when you're talking about it. You know, I had an event where we were having similar discussions like this, and the women started speaking about the things that they were struggling with, and it was horrible, it was hard to hear. And then there were men who would give their point of view, and the women could not help but feel triggered and angry towards the men because they don't agree with what they're saying. But the anger and the communicating while in that state of anger doesn't help the conversation move forward. So I imagine that simple one topic, now talking about all of these even tougher subjects, is going to be tough because we have to be of sound mind to be able to do this. And I think, as is with life, where you become an adult and you think life is one way and you realize it's not that at all, it's almost understanding, well, having to come to terms with it may not be exactly what you want or what you've envisioned, but we have to find some kind of in-between or compromise that works for us all. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I know for sure it's only going to happen by leading with empathy and also understanding that the anger is not gonna, it's not necessarily gonna help. It may help to a point, but when it's time to sit down and figure out, okay, where are we going wrong, what needs to change, it's not gonna have a proper place. I feel like I was very hyper masculine growing up. It's just what I saw, and not like throwing my dad under the bus or anything. It's just in general, all the things I saw, and I was just a sponge. I just soaked up everything, and really that experience away, and then come back to Trinidad, it just made me super aware of what I say, what I do, what those repercussions could be, what I see other people doing, and on the one end, it's still horrible things out there, and it's tough to say that it's going to change because it seems very cyclical, that it's just passed on from generation to generation. But then I'm also seeing that people are more open to change, they're open to hearing about it, they're open to seeing things a different way. I think that eventually there'll just be more and more and more of that, to the point where, okay, it's just accepted norms for things that are just more positive. So that's my hope. It's what I see, but I mean, you could always have more of it. So I'm just gonna keep paying attention and seeing and hoping that we get to this point where we can meet at some point and we're all in a place where, okay, this can work.